Good evening, everyone. It's Glenn, Mudflood Australia. Quick video. Just want to talk about this image here. This is apparently an image, a sketch of Collins Street, Melbourne, 1839. It's colour. I don't know if it's redone or what's happened. I find this. I want to discuss the option that that there's a whole bunch of history wiped out, and the evidence, looking at it from a historian's methodology, seems a conservative approach. It still looks like there is big gaps. So if you look at this image, this is taken up on some hill. I don't know which hill it is. This is the Collins Street. There's obviously side streets. I'm guessing that's the Yarra River. If you have a quick look at Melbourne, you'll have Collins Street. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, Collins Street's along here somewhere, and then of course you've got the Yarra River, and that lines up more or less. There's the Yarra River there. Now there's another image. Here is a similar image, also on this hill. It's probably copied from another image from before. I don't know. But either way, you get a better look at the Yarra River. This is apparently Collins Street. Look at the distance between the property boundary here and the property boundary there. Take note that it's going to be, if we're just doing it, if this is person's drawing from from site and being on site, yeah, I'd say it's a horse length. It's about 30 meters or 35 meters, 40 meters maybe. It's quite, and you see, and the blocks of land are fairly open. There's big pastures, there's big areas. Obviously, some people have market gardens, so that's interesting. It's a sketch. It's not a photo. Obviously, there's not many photos back at the time. Going back, this is from 1837, 2 years prior apparently. This is the auction of Collins Street. This is 2 years prior, but as you can see, if we can zoom in a bit, you'll see that there's obviously straight edges, which happens to be in the picture too, but you have very tight lots. You have no market gardens. It doesn't look really like the image, but let's move on and go for a couple other items. Okay. Couple of things I wanted to talk about is that there was the old photo technology, deduce type. I don't know how you pronounce it. Anyway, that was happening. This is from Hidden Hit Melbourne. This is an 1861 photo. Obviously looks very developed. Melbourne was officially started in 1835, and so in 26 years all this happened? I don't think so. But it's not that simple. You see St Patrick's Cathedral being built. You see, you see the slums here, which seems like they've been here for a little while. It's all possibly could have been done. I don't think so in that period of time, but it's still strange when you continue on with this journey. Let's assume that there wasn't a massive city in the 1790s. Let's say it was a port. Like if you look at all the maps, all the early maps from all the early explorers, from Bowden or whatever his name is, from Flinders and all that, they'll recognise this area as a port. I say Port Phillip, and that's because it was a port. At the very least, there was a place where whalers would turn up and sell oil to the Dutch or the British ships or whatever. So I mean, that's definitely something we're going to acknowledge, that amount of history is fake. There was always a port because it was always called a port. So, but was it populated? Okay, well. This is interesting. There's a guy called Hamilton Hume, who's obviously a famous explorer. Hume. He did a book called A Brief Statement of Facts. brief statement of facts, which has a longer introduction than actual content. It's quite funny that they dither and on with all their lingo and stuff. Anyway, what's very interesting is so what he does is he's with a few explorers. He goes from New South Wales somewhere. He goes all the way down through New South Wales and ends up at around Geelong and then heads all the way back again. And he writes a statement of the accounts. He meets lots of people on the way. It all seems fairly conventional, other than he meets lots of people all through Yarra. So these by 1824 are already established townships, right? So yeah, there's been a big spread of people from so-called 1788 all the way. So that's a bit odd. Okay, so that's a bit of an incongruency. But anyway, he goes through down to Victoria, and yes, it does not mention many white people at all, and just mentions interactions with black people. Okay, so interesting. So he's down towards Port Phillip on the 16th of December at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Port Phillip. So going towards Geelong, camped that night, came across the black people. Okay, and they met up with some black fellas, and while with us, they pointed in the direction south by west, intimating by signs that white men in ships were there and engaged in sawing timber, representing this by seesaw movements. They described the sailors and vessels under sail and made use of some English expressions. Now, if we go down and look at the reference here, okay, it says, they described the actions of the men pulling boats, cutting trees, and unrolling logs. They used white men's expressions and pointed at the same time over the hills inside of us, intimating apparently that white men and ships were there. Okay, now this is a very thorough author, and you think that Hume would have now wrote who he thought they were. Yeah. Anyway, so it goes on. On 8th of December, we started homewards a little before 8 o'clock on Sunday. Below Geelong, the report of a cannon was distinctly heard in the direction of the place pointed out by the natives the day before. It was the extreme bight of the Bay of Geelong, which now bore from us as nearly as I can recollect southwest. Okay, so they go on about this cannon. They said, "Oh, it's good." Now look, these guys are supposed to be the in the know travellers and explorers, all connected to British, and how could someone not authorised be there shooting a cannon at anything? Now what are they going to say about this? Nothing, right? So they don't do anything else. That's odd as well. So if you try to reconcile all of this, what can we draw a conclusion? We see that there is also actually a person that does plate photography, and there's a lot of photos that he does of Melbourne, but apparently there's one of 1839, but you can't view it. And whenever you try to look him up, these kind of images turn up. Now, let's just while you're here, let's just look up. Let's say oldest. Victoria or Melbourne. Sorry, I'm just trying to fly. There is some pretty early stuff that goes back to this, for example, is 1847. Now you think that he did a lot of these old photos. In 1847, that's the oldest one we have of Indigenous people. And that's a pretty good shot. Also, where is the photos of Melbourne in 1847? There isn't any. Okay, so that's interesting. Just to keep note of that, I can't find any. Well, that's it. I think that there's a lot more to do, but this is enough evidence to assume that there was some people there, clearly in 1824, who were white, who were not recognised by British, and and the Indigenous people couldn't identify them racially. So, and that's clear. What else? And so that's 1824. That is 11 years prior to the official founding. There were one or two settlements there. Apparently, one in 1803 that's failed, and another one later, and that failed. I don't know. There's a couple, but I mean, you know, you think that Hume would have mentioned and correlated that and matched it up. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't think so. I think we're dealing with something else, and I think the years don't match up. So yes, there is, and I think fundamentally, when you're looking at it all, and I've got some other information, it's always going to be people that are trying to live independently of the system, creating an independent nation. There are evidence of independent churches being built, and these people do their thing, and eventually, you know, they get overrun and overtaken by the system. They refuse to pay the rates that imposed by the sovereign. They get in squabbles, and then they get written out of history, or they're just a side note. So, what is their story? What did they say? You don't get their story. You only get the story of the guy that ends up being called a squatter, but he's been there for 20 years, and he built a whole big farm. It's not there. I haven't found it. So, good luck with that. I'm interested in your comments. Thanks.